Welcome back, everyone! This is part 2 of my Rise of Skywalker analysis. If you haven't seen part 1, the link will be in the description, and if you're a returning viewer, then all I have to say is thanks for coming back, and let's get into it. So we left off with Rey and the gang meeting up with Lando, who tells them where to find Ochi of Bastoon's ship. Lando and Luke were looking for the same MacGuffin that Rey is now, the Wayfinder. Ochi apparently had some kind of clue to lead to this Wayfinder, so Rey and friends venture off to find it, but the First Order is hot on their tail. They find speeders and Poe hotwires them. Finn asks how he knows how to do that, as if being able to do that is extremely rare for someone who knows a lot about ships. They escape on these speeders, but a First Order trooper spots them. Right away there are 2 track speeders chasing them, a design that seems futile in a world where the most basic craft can hover, including the primitive skiffs the heroes are on. These speeders are revealed to have the ability to springboard stormtroopers with jetpacks. This sparks the now infamous scene which I have the liberty to actually let you see, as they felt confident enough about it to release it before the film came out.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly now!
It evokes very basic Marvel-esque comedy. Repeating a line with multiple expressions equals funny, I suppose. Comedy may be a bit more subjective than other things, so I'll focus on the more technical aspect of these lines. This is highly nitpicky, but wouldn't each of these characters already know of flying stormtroopers? To be fair, there are no jetpack troopers in any of the films, excluding the Fets, but according to the video games and the TV shows, i.e. Rebels and Clone Wars, the Empire and the Republic had troops with jetpacks. 3PO would surely know that, and maybe Poe doesn't know every troop variant, but surely Finn should know. He was a member of that regime just a year prior, stationed on 2 of the most important military locations the First Order had, Starkiller Base and the Supremacy. I suppose it is possible for the First Order to have implemented this tech for their military in the last year that Finn had been out, but either way it's a pre-existing thing. Look, as I said, this is very, very nitpicky. But it's clear that Disney and Lucasfilm try to take a lot of pride and effort to have this super airtight continuity and consistency with all their books and comics and movies and whatnot. So I think it is completely fair to point out dumb stuff like this. The only way their surprise makes sense is if all 3 of them have no clue of the military lengths of the First Order, Empire, and Republic, which just seems wrong. Rey and Poe's speeder split up, with Rey staying in the dunes and Poe going into the canyons. BB-8 hits one of those little canisters sitting on the speeder, causing it to fly up in the air and release yellow powder, as seen in the festival from earlier. This causes one of the track speeders to crash, and Rey says, "Never underestimate a droid," repeating Leia's line from earlier in the film. In the canyons, Finn throws a rope into the track of the speeder chasing them, causing it to get caught up and crash. Again, making you wonder why they weren't just normal hover speeders, but whatever. With Ochi's ship straight ahead, Rey notices it and becomes distracted, saying she's seen it before. Poe and Finn call out to her because the one jet trooper is still left firing explosives at the speeders. Both of their speeders get blown up and they all get violently launched into the air. They all land on the ground safely and are able to shoot the jet troopers as it comically flies around and explodes. They realize they fell directly into what is essentially quicksand. All of them begin to sink under, and in a last breath attempt, Finn says, "Rey, I never told you," and is cut off by being completely submerged. Then they are all eaten by the undulating sand. My first natural thought when seeing this scene, not even being cynical, was that Rey would lift them all out of the sand. They fell in and I was like, oh, that's clever, this will be a way to use her power that was set up in the beginning of the film with her floating. And then they all sink and I was just so confused. It cuts to everyone falling into a cave, showing that the quicksand was indeed not deadly. How is there a cave under shifting sand? Poe is calling everyone's name and 3PO says, "You didn't say mine, but I'm alright," which is genuinely a funny line, so once again, props to 3PO in this film. Rey turns on her lightsaber and unconvincingly squints to look around the cave, and Poe turns on his flashlight and it literally makes a SpongeBob sound effect. I don't know, I'd rather not have that flesh-melting weapon held all loosey-goosey in this cave. Seems like the flashlight emits more of a useful light, directly ahead rather than a short spanning glow. Rey asks Finn what he was going to tell her, and he says he'll tell her later, and Poe is upset and there's a little comedic banter. By the way, this concept is dropped. You never find out what Finn was going to tell Rey. Fantastic writing. They find Ochi's speeder in the cave, implying that he sank into this pit while on his speeder that can hover. Then they find his bones all laid out on the ground. Poe says, "Bones. I don't like bones," in a very Indiana Jones fashion.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Rey finds a dagger on the ground and becomes uneasy when she picks it up, saying that horrible things have happened with it. They notice that the dagger has writing on it, and 3PO reads it and tells them that it is the clue that Luke was looking for, as it tells the location of the Wayfinder. When Poe asks him to say it, 3PO refuses, saying he can't because it was written in the language of the Sith, and his programming forbids him from reading it. They, of course, get mad at 3PO, and he tells them that he is incapable of doing it because the Senate passed a law requiring it. As he's telling them this, a large snake rises up from behind him. They all prepare to shoot it, but Rey tells them to stop. She walks slowly up to the snake to see that it has large scratches on a part of its body. She leans over and puts her hand to the wound, which is strange, considering that most large hostile animals would certainly kill you if you walk up to it and put your hand on its open flesh wounds. She begins to concentrate, and the wound is healed. Force healing. Force healing is a thing, like from the video games. She can heal things with the Force. How has no one ever done this? I mean, really, like, you're telling me that over 1,000 generations of the Jedi ruling the galaxy, they never learned this power and taught it to everyone? Obi-Wan really could have used that on Qui-Gon, huh? Oh yeah, and I'm sure the books will make an excuse for it and say it's extremely difficult and only a few knew how to do it or something, but that's not what the movie says. And if that's the case, then how does Rey know how to do it? Did Leia teach her, and did Luke teach Leia? None of this makes sense. This is an example of a world-breaking new Force ability, as there is no doubt that this could have been used in other films. Just like the matter teleportation, the film is going to run with this idea, and this healing mechanic will be pretty important later on. This is just the setup. It's clear what JJ wanted for this scene. He wanted the sandpit to be a danger that reveals to be a blessing, as they find the dagger in the cave and Rey introduces the Force heal. But the contrived nature of this event is ridiculous. It is self-evidently a convenience that they just happen to drive the speeders on this path so that when they get blown up they land perfectly in the quicksand. Disregarding that, as I said earlier, it is genuinely confusing as to why Rey doesn't just lift them up out of the sand, considering they all thought they were about to die. The setup for the Force heal is fine in its own right if you ignore how stupid Force healing is. Here's a way you could fix this scene. If all the elements needed to stay the same, i.e. they need to fall in a sandpit and find a cave and heal the snake, then how about you just have them fall into quicksand and Rey, in a big spectacle that shows off her Mary Sue power, lifts them all up out of the sand along with the sand itself. Doing so could reveal the cave within. This would make it so the Force is being used consistently, and not have the cave have a ceiling of literal quicksand. It could have just been filling up the cave rather than being the ceiling. You could still have OG's bones and the snake and all that, just without as many contrivances. The Knights of Ren have landed on the planet and get their nice trailer shot in. Can't wait to see if they do anything. As they approach Ochi's ship, Rey senses something and wanders off on her own. They go inside the ship that somehow still works. In fact, how is the ship even still there? It had to have been sitting there for several years, in a desert. How has it not been scavenged for parts or taken? They literally just walk into the ship and start it. Seems a bit convenient that no one else had ever done that. Finn tells Chewie to go get Rey so that they can leave, and it is shown that the Knights of Ren are right there watching Chewie walk out. Finn seems to sense Kylo Ren as his TIE fighter is coming in from the distance. He runs out to see Chewie being captured by troops and put into a transport. So Chewie was caught without anyone knowing? He didn't yell? There was no struggle? He's Chewbacca. Kylo's TIE is coming directly for Rey and she turns on her lightsaber and begins to run forward away from it. In that trailer shot moment, she jumps over the ship and slices its wing off, causing it to not just crash, but smash into the ground, and the cockpit rolls violently for like half a mile and then explodes. Look, I do not care about what force powers you have, there is no way you survive that. It seems to be a running theme in this movie. Finn screams to Rey that Chewie was taken as the transport is leaving, so Rey begins to use the Force to try and pull it back to the ground. Somehow, Kylo is just walking away from his TIE completely unscathed. How can you possibly survive that? He doesn't even have any cuts or bruises or anything. He's just casually walking away as if he didn't just get blendered in a rolling ball and then explode. I suppose if the Emperor can survive what happened to him, then you can survive anything. Kylo begins to pull the transport as well, and they have yet another force pulling battle like they did in TLJ. It gets pretty intense, and then Rey accidentally shoots lightning out from her hand, destroying the transport. Accidentally. Remember when Force lightning was this terrifying force to be reckoned with? No pun intended. originally made to personify the pure evil power of the Emperor. It wasn't just some little special effect to make your eyes widen, it was actually something with weight and meaning. Rey has literally become so overpowered that she can use one of the most high-level Force abilities by accident. It's like she let out a fart. It just happened when she pushed too hard. That's insane. Poe and Finn yell to Rey that they need to leave, and they run back into the ship with Kylo just standing there. What was Kylo's intent throughout this entire scene? Going back to when he was charging Rey in his tie, what did he want to happen? Surely he meant to kill her. Or maybe if that's what he wanted, he would have just shot at her? If he wasn't trying to kill her, then what was he trying to do? Was it a test? Did he expect to crash? The Emperor tasked him with killing her, but just before he said he was going to turn her to the dark side. So I'm guessing this was a test, considering that later in the film he refers back to this incident as him pushing her. If all he wanted to do was push her to use the dark side, did he really need to fly at her threateningly with his fighter? I guess they just wanted that trailer shot. What was his plan if she just got splattered? And if he's going to try and turn her or kill her, either way, why does he just let her leave with all her friends? Also, why did the Knights of Ren only capture Chewie? Surely they knew there were more people, and if they can take Chewie, then they could have totally handled Finn and Poe. And no, none of this is part of Kylo's master plan or anything, because later when they go to the planet Kijimi, he's trying to capture her. So why didn't he just do it here? He and the Knights had them pinned and they let all but Chewie get away, whose capture only drives them to go and save him and escape with him and the dagger anyway. Oh, and yeah, spoiler alert, Chewie's not dead. Forgot to mention that. Crazy, insane moment where they make you think they killed Chewbacca by accident. I'll talk about that later. It cuts to Ochi's ship floating stationary among some space rocks. On board, Rey is distressed about losing control and killing Chewie, so she thinks. She tells Finn that she had a vision of the Sith throne with her and Kylo on it. I guess Rey's going to battle with the dark side now, considering she had no conflict in The Force Awakens and had like one scene about it in The Last Jedi. I suppose it's time for her to have that age-old struggle, except now it's without reason and out of nowhere. It's just like randomly thrown in to add some kind of conflict. Yes, I understand that it's later revealed that she is a Palpatine, but it's not like she knows that yet. And even if she did, why does that instantly make her struggle when she's been doing perfect for so long? It feels like JJ remembered that Rey needed to have some kind of conflict, and they threw in some lines about her being scared of turning evil. This problem never really goes any farther than just being mentioned a couple times. But when the time comes for her to turn and she's actually faced with temptation, she rejects it and has no problem not becoming evil. On a First Order destroyer, General Hux informs Pride that another transport was brought from Pasaana with a wink wink valuable prisoner. This prisoner is of course Chewbacca. Wonderful, this film's specialty in full action, making emotional conflict only for it to be resolved in the next scene. What was the point of that? The only thing making the audience think Chewie died does is making Rey get all emotional. Sure, Poe and Finn have some lines about it, but it's not like they wouldn't have gone on with the mission if they didn't think he was dead. This is how not to do emotional resolutions. It's baity and sloppy to fake kill a character and then say, psych, they're alive, literally, in the next scene. A good example of emotional resolve is in A New Hope, when Han leaves before the Death Star attack to take his money, but ends up returning and saving Luke at the last minute. Han leaving makes complete sense, as during the entire movie he makes it clear he's only doing it for the money. His return serves as being the end of his character arc, with it being the payoff not only emotionally, but also for the film's writing of his character. It doesn't leave you scratching your head wondering why he ever left the fight to begin with. It has a purpose. Here, it is only done so the audience can go, no, Chewie, and then, yay, Chewie! There's no real intelligent writing going on here, and it is used solely for emotion baiting. Rey, Finn, and Poe discuss how all hope seems lost as Chewie had the knife leading to the Wayfinder, when 3PO says he still has it in his memory. He tells them that it can only be retrieved by memory bypass, which he describes as dangerous. Poe says he knows of a black market droidsmith on a planet called Kijimi, which Poe seems apprehensive about. He says he had some bad luck there, and Finn and Rey give him a weird look, continuing the running joke introduced in this film that Poe had a shifty past. They all say it's the right choice and do it for Chewie. A moment that seems hollow since we already know he's not dead. Their ship heads for Kijimi, and in Boba Fett fashion, the Knights of Ren ship follows them from being hidden behind a rock. On Ochi's ship, BB-8 finds another droid. He turns it on, and it says hello to Rey. She goes to touch it, and it cowers like a dog. Rey says that it must have been treated badly in the past. So droids are like abused animals? That seems a bit strange. It's a droid. More on this little droid in a little bit. Now on Kijimi, Poe walks around the snowy village, as this very Nazi Germany-esque scenery is unfolded. The buildings are made of cobblestone and the First Order patrols are marching everywhere, knocking on doors and arresting people. It definitely looks and feels cool, feeling like a World War II village or something. This is the kind of world building that the previous films should have had, but with just this little bit in the final film, it isn't enough to flesh out the First Order at all. They run into someone who knows Poe that puts a gun to his head, avidly threatening to kill him. He tries to reason, telling this new character, Zori Bliss, that they're on an important mission. She mentioned how Poe used to be a spice runner, the Star Wars equivalent of drug runner. Finn and Rey ask in surprise if that was true, and he tells Finn that he used to be a stormtrooper and that Rey used to be a scavenger. I get that it's a joke, but there's no way being a scavenger for parts is comparable to drug running. Zori realizes that Rey is the girl the First Order is after, and says her bounty could be useful to them. Zori, I assume, gives the order to kill or capture all of them, and Rey lashes out and single-handedly beats up all the thugs and pulls the saber onto Zori. In a comically, I'm super powerful but also completely nice and virtuous way, she says, "We could really use your help. Please." Reminiscent of the emotionless, lifeless, but humorous tone of K2SO from Rogue One.
Congratulations. You are being rescued. Please do not resist.
Zori tells Rey that she thinks she's okay, as if her getting beat up eliminates the moment where she was going to kill them and turn them in. They run away and the camera pans up to all the Knights of Ren walking out of the hallway. Why are they not splitting up? Are they even trying? Zori leads them through a weird club where John Williams makes a cameo as the bartender. In the back room, we are introduced to the single greatest character in all of the Star Wars saga, the droidsmith, Babu Frick. I know, hold your applause. Babu tells them that he found data in 3PO's forbidden memory banks. 3PO is flipping out, and Finn says this dumb throwaway line that'll come in handy later about R2 backing up his memory, which I guess is something R2 does. 3PO tells him it's unreliable, so it doesn't matter. Remember that for later. In a cringe-inducing, corny moment, Rey tells 3PO he knows the odds better than any of them. Okay. He stands up and repeats what Poe said earlier about how important the mission is, and how if it fails, it will all have been for nothing. He turns around and says he's taking one last look at his friends, a group of people he barely knows and who hate him. Heartwarming music plays as the abused dog droid from Ochi's ship, Dio, literally says sad, in case the audience doesn't know how to feel at this moment. General Pride tells Kylo that Rey and her friends were tracked to Kijimi, and Hux offers to destroy the entire city. Kylo stops him with a finger point, which is exactly what Han does all the time in The Empire Strikes Back. So if that was intentional to make him seem more like his father, then I have to say that's a neat but very small detail. Zori and Poe are on the rooftop keeping watch, while he asks her how things have been since he left. She says not good and shows him this disc they refer to as a captain's medallion, an item that grants passage through any blockade or onto any ship. Basically, she has a dumb little magic thing that can do whatever they need to. Zori asks him to run away with him, in a very sudden and awkward tone change considering minutes earlier she was going to literally shoot him in the face. And she wasn't being like tongue-in-cheek about it either, she legitimately was going to kill him and had to be physically stopped from doing so. Now she's like in love with him? What is going on? Poe tells her about the Battle of Crate and how all hope seems lost, and says everyone has given up. This is a super small nitpick here, but then she says, "I don't believe you believe that." What kind of line is that? That's some first draft material right there. It's just so awkward. Using believe like that twice in a row is not the best way to word that. She could have just said, "I don't believe you think that," or something like that. Super small detail, but a flaw nonetheless. It comes across as very amateur and clunky, and I'm sure that me saying that will bring some folks out of the woodwork saying, well, there's clunky lines in the original films too. And yes, there are clunky lines in the originals, but that has nothing to do with this film. Just because the other films have flaws does not mean this one can have the same problems. And it's less so a clunky or cheesy line like "only a master of evil Darth" or "I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters" than it is just objectively poorly written. Zori tells them that they win by making you think you're alone. Add that to the pile of generic buzzword lines about hope and emotions regarding winning battles. I don't think they win by making you think they're alone, I think they win by having 10,000 Death Stars. Rey tells Finn that she recognizes Ochi's ship because it was the ship her parents were on when they had left her on Jakku. Before Finn can ask her any questions, Poe and Zori come down to tell them that they need to leave because of the incoming destroyer. Babu Frick, bless his soul, activates 3PO to tell him the forbidden message. His eyes turn red, and he says that the Wayfinder is in the Imperial Vault on a moon in the Endor system. He repeats the phrase, "Only this blade tells," which will come in handy later. Rey looks outside to see Kylo's destroyer, and suddenly senses Chewie, saying he is on the ship. A reveal that means nothing to the audience since we've known he was alive since the scene after he supposedly died. They are running back to the ship when Zorii decides to give Poe her magical disc, an item she was planning to use to escape the hole that she said Poe put her in, and sends him on his way, with them even making a kissing joke, after she almost killed him in cold blood 5 minutes ago. I feel like this whole thing with Zorii was either a really cheap and poorly written attempt to give Poe's character something to do in these scenes, or it was some kind of bigger and more drawn out character arc that got cut out. I wouldn't be surprised by either, but I doubt it was the latter. Kylo's ship lands on the ground as Rey and friends fly towards the destroyer in Ochi's ship. They plug the magical disc into the console and are granted immediate passage into a hangar. This makes no sense. Why would this item even exist? I guess the idea is that it is for a First Order captain to use on their actual ship and remove the process of getting permission to land on fellow First Order cruisers, but for it to be a universal item that just can be used anywhere and at any time is illogical. Zorii had to have gotten it off of a captain, therefore the First Order should know that a captain's medallion has been compromised and should be deactivated in the system. But no, a random scavenger ship can just enter the destroyer with no question. This is a ridiculous plot device only added so that they can have an easy method of boarding the ship. They land and run out guns blazing, killing several stormtroopers right there in the hangar. I feel like the scene personifies what this new trilogy is like. In the original trilogy they would use sneaky and logical ideas to be able to maneuver around ships, but now it's just like, oh, forget all that, let's just do it. Should there be some kind of process into getting out of the ship? And nope, you gotta just keep moving. They sneak around and once confronted by 2 stormtroopers, Rey uses a mind trick to make them tell her where Chewie is being held. At this point, I can't even be mad about the Force stuff. I suppose it's being consistent with its own logic. Rey did use this in The Force Awakens, so it would make sense why she could use it now. They are making their way through the ship, now destroying cameras, which you would have assumed they'd do earlier. Though if the First Order notices cameras are down, then they'll probably figure out what's going on. Rey pauses and says that the dagger is on the ship as well, and that she needs to go get it. Poe asks her why, and she says, "A feeling." This line will come up later. I guess the Force told her. Finn and Poe save Chewie and then run around mercilessly killing stormtroopers, an aspect of Finn's character that was never explored to begin with. He knows that all of them are brainwashed people rather than recruits. Shouldn't he grapple with killing them? He didn't in The Force Awakens a minute after revolting, so I guess it is in line with the writing. Poe gets shot and they are all surrounded by stormtroopers. There is a little scene mixed in where General Pride walks into the hangar where Ochi's ship is and asks whose ship it is. It's almost like no one even manually cleared the ship or checked if it was even a First Order vessel. Rey walks into the room that has Vader's helmet in it. On a table in a room is Chewie's stuff and the dagger. Why would they keep the prisoner's belongings in Kylo's chamber? What's the point? I mean, maybe the dagger, considering Kylo probably has some personal investment in that item, but Chewie's stuff? I don't know. This seems convenient, if anything. Rey picks up the dagger and hears echoes of her little girl voice yelling no. Suddenly, Kylo appears, but it's a forced Skype call. He tells her that he pushed her in the desert to show her who she really is, implying that this was all part of his plan somehow. He tells her he knows the rest of her story. She says he's lying, and he actually says the exact words, "I never lied to you." And oh boy, we will get to that. He tells her that her parents were still nobody, but they chose to be. He continues to pester her about her parents, and she gets upset and they clash sabers. She has a memory of her parents, with the film outright showing them hugging her goodbye. He says they sold her to protect her, which is directly contradicting what he said in TLJ, making what he said, in fact, a lie. He originally told her that they were absolutely no one, and that they had sold her off for drinking money. They were drunken junk traders and were buried in a grave on Jakku. I will go through all of that shortly. They begin to fight, showing it on both the destroyer and down in the village, with their sabers splitting open a basket of beads in the village, and they spill out in the destroyer, continuing that teleportation idea. Kylo tells her that it was Palpatine who had her parents killed. He says he was looking for her and they wouldn't say where she was. It shows a flashback of Ochi killing Rey's parents with the dagger. She lashes at him and they fight, and while they're fighting, they smash the pedestal with Vader's mask on it, and it falls onto the floor, teleporting to Kylo's location. He realizes where she is and then says he will tell her why Palpatine wants her dead. Shouldn't he have already known where she was? She had the dagger in her hand the entire time. and it seems as though he didn't even see it. I guess he could have seen it but not know she was still in that specific room. Oh well. He does another Han finger point and tells a stormtrooper to lock down the ship. Finn, Poe, and Chewie are lined up in the detention center, about to be executed. Hux is there and tells the stormtroopers he'd like to do it himself. What happened to those executioner troopers from TLJ? Maybe they ran out of them. Poe and Finn start casually arguing about what Finn was going to tell Rey, once again making a joke out of it but never saying what it was, and they flinch as a blaster is fired behind them. A bit of a weird conversation to be having the moment before your assumed death. It's like even they know they're not going to die in this scene. Suddenly, the 3 stormtroopers are lying dead on the ground and Hux, holding the blaster, exclaims, "I'm the spy," in the most in-your-face obvious way. This is another example of these weird lines of dialogue where someone is just saying what's going on rather than it just being obviously implied. Yes, as soon as Hux kills them, you know he's the spy. Rey gives 3PO Chewie stuff as Kylo comes into the hangar and she sends him off to find the rest of the gang. He's walking around with Chewie's ammo belt and bowcaster on, and this was put on the posters for the film, leading me to believe there may have been an extended sequence where 3PO uses the bowcaster or something. He finds them as Hux is showing them to the Falcon, and he stops Finn for a moment. He tells him to shoot him in the arm to make it seem less suspicious. Finn shoots him in the leg instead, and asks the obvious question of why Hux is helping them. And he tells him that he doesn't care if the Resistance wins, he just wants Kylo to lose. Hux is jeopardizing his entire regime over a petty rivalry with Kylo? Hux was the big baddie general guy from the past 2 movies. I mean, TLJ made him into a joke, but he was still a prominent leader. He's just turning on his entire organization for one person? I thought he was loyal. Why would he do this? His actions lead to the Resistance winning. Why wasn't this explored more? Rey and Kylo confront each other in the hangar as stormtroopers surround them. She asks why Palpatine wanted to kill her, and Kylo tells her the most underwhelming, poorly built up reveal that she is Palpatine's granddaughter. He explains that they are a dyad in the Force, which is a thing now, I guess. He tells her that they can kill the Emperor together and rule the throne. And he gives his hand out to her for the 2nd time. 3rd time, really, if you count his offer in The Force Awakens. Suddenly, the Falcon rises up in front of the hangar and blasts its engine into the room, knocking away all the stormtroopers, but Kylo uses the Force to hold on. I think it's funny how Rey is just standing there, completely unfazed, like she's barely using any strength to hold herself down. She jumps onto the Falcon and they leave. Too bad Kylo doesn't use the Force to pull them back in. It's not like it was shown he could do something like that earlier. Hux is explaining what happened when Pride takes a gun from a stormtrooper and shoots Hux, saying they found the spy. That's the end of Hux. He was a cheesy but formidable villain in Episode 7, and Rian Johnson turned him into a clown in Episode 8. And to make up for it, JJ added a new scary general, Pride, to supersede Hux. What a shame. On the Falcon, Rey is telling Finn how it was Palpatine who had her parents killed, and how she's going to find him and kill him. Finn is a bit weirded out, and Rey gets all defensive. It's as simple as that. She could be perfect for years. Just tell her that she's Palpatine's offspring, and boom, you've got an instant conflict. Also, hold on. Let's talk about Rey being Palpatine's granddaughter. Right off the bat, I'm going to ask a strange but valid question. Who in the world did Palpatine have a son with? I mean, really, who? Was it during the prequels? Before? After? I just think that's a bit important. And second, what happened to this son of his? What's his story? Did he just go into hiding? Why was he considered nobody? That seems like a really big thing to just glaze over and accept. Why wasn't he killed earlier than after he had a daughter? Did he have the Force or training or anything? Palpatine had a son at some point, so who raised him? Was he also just put into hiding, and if so, by who? If the Emperor was worried about his offspring being a threat, why was he allowed to even be born? Or did he not know about his son until later? This gives so many more questions than it does answers, and comes across as a rushed and sloppy answer to Rey's lineage. Keeping with the nobody thing would have been better than cobbling together this weird idea, which happens to be one of the earliest fan theories about Rey. It cuts to Kylo with Palpatine's voice questioning his loyalty. He threatens to turn the fleet on him, and Kylo promises to kill Rey. So Palpatine can just talk to Kylo seemingly at any time? Is he omniscient? He knows what's going on because he feels that he could have been betraying him. So if that's the case, then why didn't he just hear Kylo when he said he was going to overthrow him? The Falcon lands on the planet in the Endor system, the one that is not Endor for some reason. They have to crash land because of a throwaway line that Poe said about the landing gear not working, which will be important later. They walk up to a cliff and look out on the second Death Star's wreckage. As I mentioned a while back, the Death Star being this intact and on this planet makes absolutely no sense. I really hate to bring up science and stuff in these movies, as that's typically not important, considering there are spaceships and things like that. If all this adhered to the rules of science, a lot of things wouldn't be able to happen. There is a suspension of disbelief that needs to play into watching a Star Wars film, as there is with any sci-fi or fantasy film, but sometimes there can be things that are so ridiculous or contrived it becomes hard to accept. Explain to me how any of the Death Star has even survived after seemingly getting vaporized in Return of the Jedi, and how did this massive of a chunk, practically a third of what was built, fall into the planet without A, burning up or splitting into the atmosphere, or B, causing a massive, ginormous explosion when it hit the ground. Small asteroids can demolish miles of land. We're talking a small moon landing on the planet. This would likely cause the entire planet to be demolished, or at least make a large crater. Not only that, but like I said, how did it not fall onto the forest moon of Endor? The Death Star was in its orbit, for crying out loud. There's no way it could have flown away to some other planet. Impossible. That point doesn't even make me raise an eyebrow because of the science. It's more so of the question of why couldn't it just be Endor? I'm not saying any of this is a good idea, but if you're dealing with the wreckage of the Death Star, which the film unfortunately is, why in the world would you make it some other planet? Out of fear that it would be too similar to Return of the Jedi? I doubt that, since the ending is already copying it anyway. It just makes no sense. It's just on screen and part of the story to make you say, ooh, I remember that. Absolutely no substance or sense to it. Just accept the terrible contrivance and move on. Rey remembers what 3PO had said, only this blade tells, and takes out the dagger. She pulls out this curved ruler thing from the hilt and holds it up in front of her. The camera shows her perspective looking at the dagger in the foreground and in the wreckage in the background, as she moves it so that the tip of the ruler she pulled out is pointing to a specific spot. The ruins of the Emperor's spire. The dagger's point was to tell where the location of the Wayfinder was, and also to literally point to the exact spot on a piece of wreckage where it is. When was this dagger made? What's the point of using a dagger instead of just a map or coordinates or something? And the bigger question is, how in the world does this make any sense? So the dagger has a little pointer that can be pulled out to curve up in an arc. I'm assuming that the coordinates 3PO gave when he was in redacted mode or whatever were the coordinates for this spot on the planet or something. Given the fact that they know where to go and use this riddle in the message that tells them to use the dagger to point where it is, how does this work at all? They're trying to do the Goonies thing or the Indiana Jones Staff of Ra moment, except it actually makes sense in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indy has the Staff of Ra and puts it in a specific notch on the floor, making it stationary and not able to be changed or affected by his perspective, and the sunlight, once at the right angle, lines up with the staff and shines through on where they need to go. And the angle of the sun is mechanical, it's not the angle of where you're standing on a cliff facing the spot. The sun, at some point in the day, is going to shine perfectly at that staff. All of those aspects create a believable and functioning method of revealing the clue. Here it is just holding up an item and making it point to a spot. To be fair, I did not notice this at first, but the markings on the dagger and the notches in the blade line up with the wreckage, with little notches being the shape of the ruins sticking out. Even still, it's completely based on 1. How far away from the spot she is, 2. The angle at which she is facing the spot, and 3. The way she's holding the dagger up, i.e. how far from her face she's holding it and how high in the air she's holding it, etc, etc. Also, as I brought up earlier, when was this even made? It had to have been made before Rey's parents were killed, but why would it be made to line up with wreckage in an ocean? Shouldn't the ruins shift and fall apart more or move around? Ochi, for some reason, made a super cryptic way of locating the Wayfinder by inscribing it so that it would match to what should be a shifting piece of trash in the sea. And why would he make this at all in the first place? Clearly he knows where the Wayfinder is, since he was able to make a device that points to it. So he's been there and knows where it is. If the Wayfinders are meant to be kept secret, you'd think that he wouldn't create a way to find it. Yes, it's cryptic, but not in a way that makes sense, but even if it did, why would he leave a trail to it? Doesn't he want to make sure no one finds it? Since it leads directly to Palpatine. If that wasn't enough, this is all based on the assumption that no scavengers would ever find it. I know that is a pretty large trash pile, but still, I mean, a scavenger finds it. That's what happens. Someone else could have gotten to it by accident first, even without the dagger. But of course, the dagger certainly makes it a lot easier, making you wonder again why the dagger would even exist to begin with. It makes absolutely no sense. I feel like I have to be missing something here. There's no way they could write this and not understand that it makes no sense. Someone might call this a nitpick and say I'm thinking too much about it, but it's not a nitpick when this is the plot device that drives the entire story forward from this point. This thing with the dagger and the wreckage is the crux of this entire sequence on this planet, so it's not a nitpick to call out how unbelievably retarded this is. People on horseback approach them, and the woman leading them asks them if they are the Resistance members she had received a transmission about from Babu Frick, who said they are the last hope. Which I think is hilarious, imagining him saying that. Rey tells her that there is something inside the Death Star that they need, and the woman, whose name is Janna, tells them that she can get them there by water, but not with the current wave conditions, what with them being very violent. She says she can do it first thing the next morning, but Rey stresses that they don't have the time. Poe says, worth a choice? Another awkward first draft sounding line. Wouldn't it have made more sense to say worth a chance? Whatever. They're fixing the Falcon and Janna hands Finn a part. He pauses, noticing it is a First Order part. Janna tells him that they scavenged it from a downed cruiser on the planet, the one that they had escaped from. Janna and all of her people are ex-stormtroopers, just like Finn. They share each other's troop numbers, and Janna tells her how they decided to revolt, with her entire company laying down their weapons after being told to fire on civilians, just like Finn. He explains how he knows the Force is what brought them there. When she questions if it is real or not, he confirms that he knows it is. BB-8 tells them that Rey is missing, and they go back to the cliff to see her using a skimmer to get to the wreckage now. She is riding the huge waves like an absolute pro, especially for the first time using the skimmer. In fact, probably her first time ever using a water vehicle, considering she is, from a desert planet. Poe is upset and says they'll need to fix the Falcon as soon as possible to go get her. I forgot to mention, the reason the Falcon has no landing gear at this moment is to give them a reason why they can't just get there themselves and land the Falcon on the ruins. But why couldn't the Falcon just hover over the wreckage and drop Rey off to go get the Wayfinder? They don't need to land. The Falcon has hovered in place before, in fact, in the scene earlier in the hangar, and even later in the film. The landing gear issue is written to create this conflict with Rey going off on her own, but neglects its own logic because the landing gear wouldn't affect the Falcon being able to do what they needed it to do. The entire story is forged by contrivances that contradict themselves. Finn tells Poe that they need to go after her, and that he has no idea what she's dealing with. Poe says, "Oh yeah, and you do?" in that weird kind of, "could you tell Luke, is that who you would tell?" kind of attitude, almost implying a love triangle. Finn says he in fact does, and so does Leia. Poe angrily says, "Well, I'm not Leia," and Finn says, "That's for damn sure." This is another instant conflict dialogue scene. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and they're really just fighting about nothing. The anger and aggression just comes out of nowhere, and they're arguing over concepts first introduced in the scene. Is it implying that Poe wants to be just like Leia and that Finn doesn't think he's doing a good job? Or perhaps it is just thrown in there so that there can be some compelling dialogue to make sure you don't lose interest. Finn is looking out on Rey as she makes it to the ruins, and Janna tells him that there is another speeder they can use. So there really was no need to wait to use them anyway, since both them and Rey are able to make it over. There's some shots of the inside of the Death Star that look straight out of the Force Unleashed. How is this much intact? It just looks as though the Death Star was always on the ground and was just left to dilapidate, rather than being vaporized and thrown onto a planet. Rey is climbing around and comes across a hallway that literally still has stormtrooper armor just laying around as though they just fell there. Again, it's almost as if they forgot the Death Star exploded from the inside and then crashed onto a planet. Ridiculous. She climbs up into the remains of the Emperor's throne room with a nice little familiar John Williams score. There's literally glass still in the windows behind the throne. How? It was blown up and fell onto a planet. You would think the impact of the thing hitting the ground would at least make the glass shatter. This is unbelievable, in the most literal sense. Also, the throne room looks nothing like it did in episode 6. Where's the elevator that led up into it, which was the only way in? And it's clearly still raised up because when it shows the spire from the cliff, you can see it's pretty high off the ground. The room isn't to scale at all, and there's no big staircase leading to the throne or those weird blue circle things anywhere. Where's the big screens on the two walls? And there certainly wasn't a door there before. I can absolutely see someone saying this is pure nitpicking, but to be fair, this is about as objective and technical as you can get as far as critiques go. This is a flaw. That's not in any way my opinion, it's just a fact. If you compare the rooms from each movie, you can see they are not the same, even though they are meant to be. This wouldn't be a big deal if this next detail wasn't added, making it clear this design change was for the purpose of a plot device. She looks over and a door opens. A door. You're telling me the wiring and door mechanisms still work? I can't anymore. I just can't. She walks into yet another Cave of the Dark Side copy where she sees the Wayfinder. She picks it up and then is confronted by the infamous Dark Rey with the super dumb lightsaber design. Dark Rey says, "Don't be afraid of who you are," mimicking what Leia said earlier. Again, trying to drum up the idea that Rey's possibly going to turn to the dark side comes out of nowhere. Just saying it doesn't make it so. They fight, again mirroring the scene from The Empire Strikes Back, and Dark Rey traps Rey's saber down the middle of her folded up one, which makes no sense considering you could just slide the lightsaber down the middle and cut it in half, but hey, it's just a vision after all, so whatever. Dark Rey makes weird scary shark teeth at normal Rey, which causes her to back up and fall out of the room, dropping the Wayfinder. Kylo Ren is suddenly there, who catches it. He tells Rey that she has proven herself not to be a Jedi, somehow, and that she can't go back to Leia, just like he can't. He offers again for her to join him, and then he destroys the Wayfinder. She gets mad and they begin to fight. Why exactly can't Rey be a Jedi? I guess he's just saying that to mess with her, but like, what's the reasoning? It cuts to Leia in what must have been some alternate version of her reaction to Han's death, as she stressfully grabs the side of a table. She gets walked off screen by someone, and Maz randomly tells R2 that Leia knows what must be done, and reaching out to her son will take all of the strength she has left. Obviously, they're using Maz to explain what's going on, since Leia can't do it herself because they don't have Carrie Fisher to record those lines, sadly. But I don't think having Maz just outright explain to the audience what is going on was the best thing to do. It comes across as very forced and odd, because Maz just, knows what's happening. Why does she know what Leia's doing? I guess the Force told her. Rey and Kylo continue to fight on the wreckage, as Finn and Jannah are there to watch. Finn once again does his classic screaming Rey's name, which is just tired at this point, and she force pushes him back. This may be the first time in a Star Wars film where the lightsaber fight is actually boring. There's no epic music playing, the fighting is really rough and choppy, since they keep pausing to jump over the big waves. Then they start using the Force to hold back each other's blades when they strike, which seems like a really useful power that I think was just kind of implied to be something you couldn't do. And they do it, and they don't use it to their advantage. They just stare at the saber while it's frozen instead of using theirs to slash at them. And you can't argue that they're not trying to kill each other, because they definitely are. Rey was clearly trying to slice him open before, and then Kylo is about to kill her in just a moment. Surprisingly, Kylo starts to beat Rey. She becomes weak and cannot hold back his hits anymore. She is pummeled down, and just as Kylo is about to deliver the death blow, Leia's voice is heard saying, "Ben." Leia is shown laying down in a bed, presumably dying. Kylo drops his saber, and Rey catches it, immediately stabbing it into his midsection. Leia's hand falls, implying that she has died, and Rey becomes shocked. Kylo falls to the ground, she kneels down and puts her hand on him, and Force heals him, fulfilling the setup from the cave snake. This is absolutely lore-breaking, as there is no sensible way that she knows how to do this, and the thousands of Jedi from the prequels didn't. Like I said, it's a shame Obi-Wan didn't know how to do this to save Qui-Gon. The Force can heal fatal wounds. Insane. Rey tells him that she did want to take his hand, but Ben's hand, not Kylo's. Their fight happened to have come to an end right where Kylo parked his tie, and she gets up and leaves. So why did she heal Kylo? I guess it's because she felt bad for killing him, and she leaves because she believes that she is going too far towards the dark side? A little funeral is gathered around Leia's body, and now Poe, Finn, and Chewie are back at the Resistance base, and an officer lady tells them that Leia is gone. They don't really question why or how, but Chewie, understandably, is very upset, in an inherently touching moment. He falls to the ground and cries out. I say inherently touching because Chewie and Leia's relationship was not founded in this trilogy. The writers did not have to build up their bond to make this reaction to her death impactful, because all of their relationship was built in the original films. There's no way they could mess that up. Well, there is, but you know what I mean. Of course, we're going to feel sad watching that. It's a lovable classic character reacting to the death of a fellow classic character. It really is a just add water kind of moment. I'm not even criticizing it, it's a genuinely sad scene. I think it's hilarious when you ask most people what scene made them feel the most, they'll say this one of the few moments in the film that has nothing to do with any of the new things established in the trilogy, solely based on the bonding from the originals. Kylo is left standing on the ruins and he hears Han's voice say, "Hey kid," and Han Solo appears to be standing there. When I first saw this, I was in complete disbelief. I never expected Harrison Ford to reprise his role again, considering the man is not a big fan of Star Wars anymore. Nor was he ever, really. I wonder how big of a paycheck he got for this scene.
And it's gonna cost you something extra. 10,000, all in advance.
They talk, repeating the lines they did from their scene together in The Force Awakens. Kylo tells them that his son is dead, but Han says it's Kylo that's dead, and Ben is alive. Kylo says he's just a memory, and Han responds with, "Your memory." I guess this explains how Han is even there, since he can't be a Force ghost or anything like that. It's just a vision. Han tells him that even though Leia is gone, Kylo can still come back. Kylo repeats the line he said to Han before killing him, which is like his Tourette's or something because he said it in TLJ as well.
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. I know what I have to do.
He holds up the lightsaber and calls Han Dad, something I think we all wish we heard him say back in 2015. Han says, "I know," a reference to his classic line, and Kylo turns around and throws his lightsaber into the ocean. A bit of a dumb decision, he can still use the lightsaber regardless of the color. In fact, he needs it later in the film. I get it, it's supposed to be representing him letting go of his dark side and relinquishing that part of him. The theme of the scene is getting in the way of characters making smart decisions, but whatever. So Ben is redeemed now, I guess. That's all it took. It took him getting a message from Leia that somehow kills her, which makes no sense. Let's pause and talk about that, actually. Look, I get that they needed Leia to die somehow, but she dies from effort just like Luke did, and for doing what? Calling through the Force? A power she can do way back in episode 5. How is that enough to kill you? She literally did it with Luke while in a comatose state in the previous films. And wait, she used the Force to revive herself in space and fly back into a ship after being blown out in the previous film. How did a Force phone call do her in? I kinda feel the need to give some leeway since they didn't have as many options as they would have if she was alive. I still think this being the thing that kills her makes no sense regardless of any outside reason. Back to Ben. So a message from Leia and her dying, I guess, and Rey saving his life after almost killing him, and then an imaginary conversation with Han causes him to turn good. I can see someone saying that it only took like a minute for Vader to decide to save Luke and kill the Emperor, or rather temporarily kill him since he's back now. But that's not true. You can see throughout Return of the Jedi that Vader is conflicted. Luke even directly says so. In this film, Kylo is not at all conflicted up until this point. He's trying to either turn Rey to the dark side or kill her for the whole time. Leia's message literally stopped him from killing Rey right then and there. His redemption is very sudden and abrupt, but to be fair, a lot happens in like the 5-minute time span. It is dumb that a memory of Han is what validates his turn to good. They wanted Han to be involved in his redemption, considering his murder is what set Kylo's allegiance to the dark side in stone. But of course, Han is dead, and they can't really make him a ghost because he didn't know the Force. And there isn't really any other form of afterlife in the lore, so the best they could do was an imaginary vision. Imagine if Ben had to explain what made him turn good. All he could really say is,
well, I reenacted the time when I killed Han, but this time I made it so I turned good.
The scene is neat and emotionally compelling because it is repeating the lines from his death scene in the way that we, the audience, wanted to see happen, but also in the way that Ben wanted deep down. Of course, the whole thing seems a bit forced, since they shoehorned Han in. The Emperor is talking to General Pryde and tells him that Leia has disrupted his plans, knowing that her death has caused Kylo to turn to the light. He tells Pryde to come to Exegol, and Pryde says that he will serve him as he did in the old wars, implying that he was an Imperial general back in the day. Palpatine commands him to send a ship to a world they know and destroy it. He predicts that Rey will come to him, and the rebels will follow. So he is fine with just giving the Final Order fleet to Pryde? Rey's not dead, and his plan has gone awry, so it makes sense that he would change it up a bit. But if he is fine with giving it to Pryde even though his conditions weren't met, why didn't he just do that to begin with? Kylo had been conflicted before, as Palpatine should know, since he had been grooming him for years. Why would he put such a conflicting task onto him? Not to mention the fact that Kylo planned to do the stereotypical dark side plan of overthrowing the Master. Palpatine should have seen this coming just through common sense. Someone like Pryde already has devotion to the Emperor, not out of a longing for force power, he's just a loyalist. Pryde has no chance of turning. Palpatine should have done this from the beginning, and, well, actually, the flaws in his plan run deeper than that, but we'll get to that. One of the Death Star destroyers jumps to Kijimi, an issue that I will address later. They fire the big cannon onto the planet, and it explodes. The Resistance finds out and realizes that every ship has Death Star weapons on them. They get a transmission telling all worlds to surrender or die. The Final Order has begun. Well, this looks like a good stopping point. We've gone through about an hour and a half of the film, and so much is wrong, and so much more is to come. All the things I put away to bring up later will be resolved in the next installment. It's going to be a long one. There is so much to wrap up, it is going to be wild. That's pretty much all I've got for this time, and thanks for watching, and I will see you next time in the final third.